Okay, let's see who else jumps on. So we're back into the Glassman archives and just kind of chipping through those articles. I accidentally made a mistake. I don't know if you guys noticed. I copy and pasted the same article twice. So I got the squat one in there, and where there was supposed to be a core one, I accidentally just copied the same link and pasted the squat one again. So I'll make sure I put the core one in on today, and then we'll still go over and talk about it because I do think they're very related. That's why I picked these two to go together. All right, so for the squat clinic, a lot of this should feel like a bit of a review. So I actually want to tie it into when we see certain faults, like what else is going on there. So like some of the root causes, and then actually tie it to the core article so you guys can see a correlation. So I want to get more advanced than just like only points of performances, but also like tie it back to why those are so important. So I have a question for you guys before we dive into it. I'm sure you've encountered somebody, and it's not too often in the CrossFit space, that goes, I shouldn't squat with my hip below my knee. I should only squat to parallel. Have you guys ever encountered somebody that doesn't believe you should go too deep?
Yeah.
What's your response? There's a few really good ones.
So when when that happened to me, I wasn't really immersed in CrossFit yet, but the lady told me that her doctor said that it wasn't safe to go below parallel.
My
that
doctor
wasn't
is-
necessary.
My
Which I
doctor
think is
it's crazy.
100% the number one person that's telling people is doctors. So
Yeah.
it goes
But
right with
what I would say now is that how do you sit on the toilet?
the most simple. I'm not going to get into any explanation. Great. You got to sit down and stand up. It's as simple as that. Now, there's some toilets that are parallel, right? You're not necessarily under parallel.
Yeah.
So what about if I was on the ground? If they're saying, that's another thing to put at them, because I could just be like, well, toilet's parallel. If I'm on the floor playing with my nephew and you're telling me I shouldn't have knee flexion past 90 degrees, how do I get up? You're going to have knee flexion past 90 degrees. So just in a simple world answer put, I think you nailed it. Toilet and then getting off the floor, you're going to have to bend the knee. Now, I don't think that gets the job done for some people. Do you guys have anything else on how you can kind of prove that?
Yeah, the examples you just gave, I give for non-competitive athletes, the ones who are just here for fitness, and the competitors. I'm telling them, like, if you look at any professional Olympic lifter, they're ass to grass, they're getting all the way down. So what are you going to do? Catch it parallel and then just bail out at the bottom, basically?
The competitors is immediately no option, and I do think that's the thing to talk about. There's going to be a point in time in Olympic weightlifting where you are going to get put down there, and if you don't train down there, it's not going to go well. Have you guys ever heard for Olympic weightlifting what the strongest position is? It's at the end range of motion of a joint. It means it's bone it's bone. There's no more room to move anatomically. That's your strongest position. So when you see these really high level cleans and snatches at worlds, and you see them get put down there, it's not their musculature that stops the load. It's because there's nowhere else to go. And is hit the bottom of the structure. So that's something I'm right there with you. When we're training competitive athletes and I see them squatting, I don't want just breaking parallel. I actually want acid points of performance to there. So I think that's a great thing to pay attention to. Spot on. So when we talk about shear force, right? If I'm squatting and let's say my this is the knee and my forearm is my femur, elbow is the hip, right? And I squat and I stop here, right? Shallow squat, hip is above the knee. Where is the shear force going? Down the chain into the knee, right? So technically, stopping shallow, we have all the body weight load, including our barbell load. The knees and the patella tendon is actually what's stopping load. Now, when I break parallel and my elbow goes below my knee, now where's the shear force going? Now it's going into the
Oh.
hip joint, right? The hip joint's a much bigger joint. It can it's more capable of holding these loads over especially long periods of time. So just simply put, depending on where you stop is depending on what joint is taking the load. So a shallow squat, you're actually putting more tension in the knees. A depth squat, you're putting more in the hip. You're also going to be engaging your glutes and hamstrings more with the depth as well. So if I cut it shallow, I'm going to be very quad dominated, and I'm not going to actually involve the whole lower body system. That being said, sometimes that position, if I'm like trying to strengthen my patella tendon, that can be a great rehab position, right? You guys have seen that move where someone stands on a plate and they do like a little like step off. Like that's the same thing. And you feel it, like your knee takes a load, your quad takes a load. So it can be a very beneficial thing. But when we're talking about squatting over time, I think all of you guys nailed it. Getting off the floor for normal life, getting off the floor for normal life. For the competitor, you got to get down there because you're going to get put down there at some point in time. And then if you want to really get sciencey on somebody and talk about shear forces, they won't have nothing to say. It's one of the most annoying things I think ever, because usually the person that's making the argument is just very uneducated when it comes to this realm. Even if they're a doctor, they're not, studying biomechanics necessarily. All right, let's talk about our points of performances on the squat. Let's run through them. What's the first thing?
Up, back, and down.
Not. Nope.
Hands.
Oh, there's a stance. Yeah, you're right. No,
What did you say, Jose?
I said the hands and the elbows up.
are you
I'm
talking about
it.
We're talking
I'm
about
talking-
front.
No, just the squat.
Oh, the squat. I'm sorry. Oh yeah, the stand. Feet
stance?
outside.
Stance, yeah. Your head was in the right spot though, right?
I thought you
the
said
gun.
front squat. I heard front. Sorry.
That's okay. Your head was in the right spot, right? Stance and grip. That's always going to be the number one thing. If we lose stance and grip, we're going to lose points of performances too. We're not going to be able to move right. But D, yes, you are correct. The first thing that's going to happen is line of action. That's the butt going back and down. Why is that so important?
Because you that's the proper way of starting the squat. That keeps you on your heels. I mean,
Then now you're talking. Now we're cooking. Keeps you on your heels, right? It's going to help with balance. If I'm in my heels, what else is happening? I'm making you guys think.
you're balanced, like the balance of the frontal.
Besides balance, because you're right, that is the goal.
Posterior.
What is
chain.
heels? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, heels is going to be correlated to posterior chain. So when someone starts their squat and they don't have a line of action, really, it's not the weight in the heels is like the killer most important thing. Like they'll be fine if they squat in their toes, but they're going to lose their biggest movers. They're going to lose their biggest drivers and not engage glutes, hamstrings like they should. That's why it's going to be so important. And you're right, these are the heels come off the ground, like all of that starts to mesh and get correlated. And you see how those can be root cause things. If I don't engage so we know heels is a point of performance now too. We got 2 on the board. If I don't engage my heels, what else is likely to go wrong in my squat? If I don't engage my heels, which doesn't engage my posterior chain, leads to
Knees going forward.
what's the fall?
Oh,
These have to go forward regardless.
well,
Head's in the right space. Knees collapsing in. Right?
well,
Our knees are gonna
yeah.
our knees are gonna have to go forward to some extent. The initiation we don't want directly forward, but yeah, if the glutes aren't engaged, then we know our knee stability is not going to also be there, and then we collapse into. So boom, we got another point of performance with the knees. We talked about range of motion already, so get the hip below parallel, stand, and then obviously you guys know neutral spot.
Is that a valgus knee when the knees are caving in?
That's what that means.
Okay.
I think I want to kind of revisit this knee thing. I was dead on set where knees out, knees out, knees out. That's all I've ever heard. And man, I don't know what's going on with my algorithm, but I feel like Instagram's just hitting me up with all of the Mythbuster stuff that's saying knees in is okay, and it's showing me all these like Olympic lifters as well, and all these CrossFit
You're-
people. Like, God,
you're-
why do I
you're-
keep getting this information at me?
You're not wrong, and I'm going to build into what's happening in the very, very bottom with that as well, because there is going to be like a little buckle that is okay. Take Instagram with a grain always, right?
Because everybody knows everything.
This is my thing. They're not wrong, right? There is studies that say like your knees collapsing in aren't necessarily going to cause damage. What I have an issue with on that is your knees meant to hinge forward and back, right? Your knees not meant to have torque in it if it's collapsing in. I would like to see a study that's a 50-year study, and when someone has trained, you know, from 20 years old to 35 years old, doing it repeatedly, like what are Tia Claire Toomey's knees going to be like when she's 65 years old? Does that make sense? That's where I think we're missing some data. It's just like the Ozempic stuff right now. They're like, it's safe, it's good. It does cause, you know, a couple things, but we don't know what it's going to do to somebody's body in the next 40 years. So that's where I would be like, I'm going to be careful with it, because you look at like the form and the function, we're supposed to be back and forth. We have a little bit of wiggle room side to side, but just the over and over, I think of it as like erosion, right? Like it's not, if the water goes over the rock, nothing's wrong. It's the water going over the rock for years that we start to see erosion happen in the rock, right? I think of the body as like the same way. So that's where I will go with that. Go ahead, D, and then I'll go to my second point with it, because they aren't wrong. They are right, but that's where my head is.
I was just gonna say, why would you want to consistently squat like that? Like, I get if you're squatting like heavy and your knees cave in on the way up.
I'm gonna answer your question on that.
I can answer from my point of view, because I don't want to. It's like I get over 75%, it's happening. So the alternative
You know
is
why?
like, well,
I have your
what
why.
I thought was initially was I have weak glutes. What I've been
Not
getting
necessarily.
all the myth busting is like, no, it's like this is your optimal squat pattern is what I've been led
So
to believe.
they're still missing something. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have weak glutes. Here's where it gets really tricky. Sometimes it is. Sometimes people do have issues with weak hamstrings and weak glutes, and they are going to collapse. Sometimes they don't have weak hamstrings and weak glutes, and they're just not activating really well. So like we have to play Mythbusters with each individual, and this is why I hate Instagram stuff too, because they're trying to put one puzzle piece into everybody, which does not work. It doesn't work. It can be the glute engagement. It can be weak glutes. It can also be what they're missing, your adductors doing work. When your adductors turn on and get active, they're going to get short. When they get short, what direction is that going to pull your knees? In. Yeah, in. So when you see like waving, that doesn't necessarily mean there's issues on the outside. It's just when you get to the bottom of the squat and that muscle gets turned on, now you have multiple muscles pulling in different directions. One of them may win. We want our adductors to work hard in the bottom of a squat to help us stand. The other thing is when we hit the bottom, and you ever notice someone starts their squat and they drive their knees out really well, and it's like their hips in external rotation, and it's tracking, and then they hit the very bottom, and then it just ever so slightly they tuck in, and not like a big Tia Claire Toomey valgus, but you see them lose tension. That's when the adductors get really tight too, and they start to like fire, and they pull in as well. It also has to do with like what's happening in the hip with internal rotation as well. Because when we hit the very bottom, we need some internal rotation, and the hip needs to be able to like oscillate. There's so much stuff going on in there.
That's what I've been also understanding to be the bigger factor, is that people lack internal rotation, and that's becoming a problem for.
And they run out of space, and then like it just needs to go somewhere, and that's where it shoots in. That's why like there's really so many causes. Like for me, I went through like your exact thing. I was like, my glutes aren't strong enough. And that's damn bullshit. I can pull a brick shit house off the floor. My glutes are plenty strong. I do know my left one doesn't fire well, and I do track in more on that side. I also know I have pretty strong adductors, because for a very long time, that's the only thing I used to actually get really sore on and hit just because I don't think my squat was like really good in that point in time. So I kind of was working muscles. They were doing like more than their job. So you see how it's like, it's this big soup of things going on. And it's like, we got to figure out what ingredients missing basically by trying to soup and figuring it out and things like that. Um, but what I would say with the knees collapsing in, that's just, it's one of those things that I think happens in the fitness industry a lot. We find reasons for sometimes not great movement. A little bit's not the end of the world, but like when you see somebody that's constantly doing, I'm going to be more concerned about wear and tear over years of time. Day of, I've never had an issue. I've never seen an issue. I've read studies that say there's no issue with that collapsing. Does that all make sense? It's kind of frustrating because you go, man, it's not problem solution. It's problem and solutions that you have to just like figure out and do work on. What I will say, when we are coaching, don't settle for movement because you're like, I've seen that before on Instagram. It's okay. It may be, but like push the boundary on perfection. Because if we're pushing the boundary on perfection, then we're not only chasing and staying behind what we know is the safest, but then we're also going to chase the efficiency when we talk about like building a good athlete. Because if you talk about a heavy Olympic lift and someone receives that and their entire lower body collapses and the knees come in and the heels peel down, it's not a strong position necessarily. It may translate into some of those more advanced movements too. Does that part make sense to you guys as well?
It makes sense. I also just feel like from a coaching perspective, you just can't
Can't let it consume you.
Of take your knees out, take your knees out, take your knees out. I'm over here being like, well, I guess I must suck at CrossFit. I'm new and I can't get my knees out. What's happening here? Like that literally what I went through my first year of like, I can't do this thing. You keep saying you took my knees out. It's not happening. What's going on?
That's also where the coach needs to know how to change things too, right? Because after the second time of you saying it, if it doesn't work, hey, guess what, coach? You can say it the next 9 months and it ain't going to work then either. So depending on what it is, I mean, that can also be a stance adjustment, right? It could be you that individual was a little too wide. We had a girl at the gym like that the other day. She was like, I can't get my knees out. I'm like, yeah, you're fucking sumo squatting. Like you're at a point that I don't think you can either. And we just had to fix her stance. So adjustments in stuff like that can make a really big difference too. And like I said, a very minimal is not a big deal. Like it's really, really not. At my level 4, you're pushing your damn knees out. But like on a day-to-day basis, it's not the end of the world. We just have to make sure, is the heel peeling off the ground? Are they actually losing posterior chain engagement? If their heel's flat on the ground and they had a good line of action and they have a little swivel, that's where it's not going to be the hugest deal. But I see on a day-to-day basis, coaches get used to bad movement and let too much bad movement go through without like really pushing for good movement and like good relentlessness. I see that happen far too often. And it's like little, like don't find reasons to not correct somebody on stuff like this, even though you may have some like more knowledge on the background to know that it could be okay.
There's something that I would like to add.
Go ahead.
There is a guy that I don't know what's his name. He's a PhD PT. He constantly posts myth on Instagram about all this stuff, and he's like he likes to say about there's not a one way to
That's
do
the
a thing.
best.
But he also points out that if you are going to do one rep with something that you can handle, not for intensity and lots of reps. So he says always train yourself outside of the comfort zone, which is like the variance on the high high intensity constantly varied functional movements. It's to work out outside of your comfort zone, always doing something different. So he always says like deadlifts on one side, deadlift on not always with the right way. But the thing is that he specifies that if you are doing for multiple reps and intensity, that's not the place to do it. Okay, that's why we do it with the best mechanics possible, because you are really moving fast. That's one thing. And the other thing is that I used to do the cave in my knees a lot. I don't know what did I do, when did it start to be better at it, but I think at some point you just get better on your squat by just keep working out. And then I don't know if it was, I don't think it was my butt,
I
but
used to also, I think for me, what actually got better is I actually got a little more mobile in the hips. So like that was my case. I still do a hair when it gets heavy, just like Justin, like there's a percentage that I get to that I'm gonna come in a little bit. But I do think it gets better over time, because you have to remember it's not just always the physical, right? It's also the motor control that's happening too within that. So sometimes it's, I know you guys have coached athletes where it's like a really simple movement and they just can't put 1, 2 together, right? And they're doing some weird shit, and you gotta like just kind of let them continue to try to put it together as long as they're safe, and then eventually it comes together. Like that's a big part of it too for a long time, because I could hold a rig and do the most perfect squat you've ever seen in your life. So after a point, it wasn't like flexibility, right? That was me just not being able to keep my knees out while I was squatting while keeping my chest up. I just didn't have the capability, brain to muscle connection, and potentially strength too, right? I think one of the hardest things for me is, you guys can tell me if you've ever dealt with this, when you're trying to do a perfect squat, your upper back, does anybody ever get that? Your thoracic spine like is on fire and it's horrible. It's so hard. Like, right, I think that's just me developing strength in the upper back for like the whole. Two, that brings me like literally, I kind of answered my next little thing with on accident. I was gonna say, when you have somebody that has an air squat, and the air squat looks terrible, and then you can put a barbell in their hand, and we've all had that athlete that's like, well, I can do it with a bar, right? Why is that happening? Why can't they do it with a PVC pipe or a regular air squat, but they can give you this really pretty squat or movement with the loaded barbell?
Lack of mobility.
You are right. Can you like get further on that?
Maybe
Mobility,
their lats are tight for the front squat, or their shoulders.
that would help. What about just like, let's call air squat versus a barbell back squat?
Like, why wouldn't they be able to?
Mobility is the
What's
right word, but it's the portion of mobility that's important. So if you have somebody that can move well with load, right, even if it's just a barbell, and then you can take that same exact movement and give them a PVC pipe, like to the degree that you're saying, D, like with the front rack, like the load helps push the hand down to help them stretch against it. But like, let's use a snatch for example, right? If they can move the bar well, but they can't move PVC well, what that tells me is in the portion of their mobility, the brain to muscle connection and their own body awareness and movement is actually what needs work. It's not necessarily like
So it's
physical
neurological.
neurological. And then when we look at our period, our athlete hierarchy, right? Nutrition's first, right? Why is metabolic conditioning second? Does anybody know?
It's more important to have a, yeah.
Because if you're simply not fit enough, you can't practice. You're going to be too out of shape and winded to actually do things well, right? So getting a little fitness in there first is going to help me hold positions better, to mimic reps better, things like that. Versus we've had the person in the gym that's really deconditioned, and we do 20 seconds of butt kickers and we do 20 seconds of high knees, and they're like a 180 heart rate, right? That person's not going to be able to like actually practice. So we got to get you got to get some fitness in there. Gymnastics is next. Why is gymnastics next?
That helps with like balance, coordination,
All the
like
neurological
neurological stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And that neurological stuff means I have better body awareness and body control. So now when you go to the next one, weightlifting and throwing, I know now how to move, and it will make that safer and make that more effective. Right. So that's why it's ordered in the way that it's actually ordered if you've never gone through that. Okay, so there's a chart. I'm not going to go through all this because it would just be horribly boring. At the bottom of the article, and it's a fault, a cause, and then like he's got some remedies to help fix it. The remedies are a little bit more like training stuff, but the fault and the cause, I think, is a really good chart to kind of refer to. What I noted down is you have these fault causes. When he talked about different weaknesses in the squat, you have your hip flexor, quads, which is kind of almost in the same, the thoracic spine being an issue, obviously the core being an issue, glutes and hamstrings being an issue. So we look at all of these things. And then if you take it and you go, I got to put the right link in for you guys because I fucked up. But if you take it and then you go, let's look at the 3 big core movements that if you can master these 3 and hit the marks on, you're not going to have an issue. GHD sit up. What's our primary mover there? Everyone gets this wrong technically. Say it again, D.
Quads.
You're muted. You're muted. Justin, yeah.
The quads and hip flexors.
Beautiful. Yep. Hip flexors, that gets broken down as like the psoas and then your rectus femoris. I think I said that right. That one quad muscle, right? Yeah, those are primary movers. Like a good GHD sit up, you should be blown up there, not necessarily abs. Abs are the secondary movement, but we look at a lot of the problems in squats and faults, just weak there. So GHD sit up, boom, check the box on strengthening that if you're doing it right. Let's quickly go through our setup. How are you going to set somebody up on there? Obviously, feet in.
Feet in. Your hips should be outside of the mat, like
yeah, off. Clear the pad.
Clearing the pad. That's yeah. And then yeah, they go down and then they squeeze their legs really fast to come up.
Yep. Slight bend in the legs, right? So that way when they go down, they can't fire their legs like you're talking about. On the down, how far do we want to coach people to that? Because this is where I think a lot of novice mess it up and they're like, I don't like it. It hurts my back. Right? The back is partly set up, so that's got to be right. Because if you're sitting on the pad, your back's going to hurt no matter what. But then going back, what's a good just cue?
Open hips.
Yeah, just open your hip.
Yeah.
Because we're all different heights. So everyone's trying to touch the floor. Some people are really going to have to hyperextend to get there. Some people are not at all. So just open the hips. If you can touch the floor, great. If you can't touch the floor, not a big deal. If you got your open hips, we're still getting the range of motion that we want. And then something else that I've learned that hurts people's backs, if I go back for a GHD and I totally relax in like the bottom in the back, and then I fire my quads really hard and I come up explosive and I go from a relaxed state to explosive, that hurts the spine. So when someone goes back, we do need a little bit of tension, right? If we can remain in that tension, then when I get explosive, that tension is what's kind of casting our spine and protecting it. It won't hurt. So we got to look out for sitting on the pad. Spine's going to have to get force extended. That's going to hurt someone's back. Just trying to reach too far back, even if they're in a good position, is a problem. And then if they do get all the way back there, if they're relaxed and they fire and they explode, that's also going to hurt. So those are 3 things that if you guys run into somebody that is having issues on the GHD, like it hurts my back, that you can look out for to correct them on. The other thing I noticed with the GHD, you put a new person on there, right? They're very timid and they go back really slowly, and then they come up and then they go really slow because they're kind of, falling. They're accidentally doing a tempo and they're accidentally tearing up their abs and stuff more. So then their degree of soreness goes through the roof even worse because they accidentally turned what our normal GHD sit up and us doing 15 reps on, they made that 15 rep double as hard because they tempoed every single one of them. So be cautious of that. So when you put somebody on there for the new time and you're like, oh, we got 3 rounds, let's do 15, it's 45 reps, that's a safe range. Maybe do 10. So it's only 30 because they're likely to do that just to be safe, and then you just rub up from there. Holds I love too, by the way. So if you got a GHD wad, you want to change it up for somebody besides just doing like a parallel and sit up, have them just do a GHD hold. Every second is a rep, right? If it's 30 reps in a round and they do a 30-second GHD plank hold, it's pretty tough. Like they're probably going to have to break it up at some point in time. And a good way to get a good stimulus without causing too much damage to where they can't like sneeze tomorrow. A hollow rock. I'm not going to go through all the stuff for the hollow. Obviously, you guys know, the position is, tuck in here, the lower back's in the floor, butt is squeezed, legs are squeezed, so joints aren't moving. It's actual midline that's flexing in there.
Can I give some thoughts on GHD?
Go ahead.
I know for myself, and I think a lot of people, it can be very intimidating looking. I don't think I got on a GHD machine 2 years until I was doing. I don't think I did a GHD until I got the SoFlo. So at least 2 years in, and it was partially because the option is always given to like do V-ups or sit-ups or whatever. And
it's not. The coach is never really like bringing people over and coaching them.
So what I'm thinking is like, how can we get someone to get onto the GHD and not have to do, a full on movement, but get them to ease their way into it. Like
to learn. So like when I have GHDs in class, it's not an option. You are going to learn them. I bring the whole class over to the GHDs and we go through the GHD. It doesn't mean, and I make this very clear through my warm up because we do testing for it also. I always do testing to like, because there's always that person that thinks they're going to get on the GHD and they have zero business on the GHD. So I kind of weed them out and it's my class and you're living in it right now. But I bring everybody over. We all learn about it and we all get on it. The only time we're not going to get on it, maybe if it's 90-year-old grandma, like, and it's an obvious that she doesn't need to be on it, but we all get on. We all do it with a spotter on my call. So you're with a partner, everybody's hand is there and ready. And hey guys, you're just going to find your partner's hand. And I always do the first one, just like a 45 degree, just to dip your toe in the water, right? Just feel what it feels like to go back. Not a hard rep. Everyone can do it. And then we go to parallel, then we go to parallel again, and then we go to a full if they're feeling it. Partners are still there, ready to spot, ready to go. So each person got to learn how to set up for themselves, got to learn how to fire their hip flexors and quads well for themselves. I got to sit there and coach it and give tactile cues. I just poke somebody in the quad. Usually that makes them understand real quick. And then everyone got to do it knowing someone is there for them if they can't get back up. And then from there, we go in all different directions for the workout, right? I got some people on the GHD scaling reps. I got some people doing parallel, some people doing plank holds, other people doing stick sit-ups or V-ups. Like you're still going to do what you want to do and what's right for you to do, but at least you know how to do it. Because maybe you get curious and you do 5 sets of 5 tomorrow, and then that starts to build you to a point where you are going to do workouts on it.
Yeah, that partner thing, that's good. I'm not sure if I've seen that or not. But for me, what was funny for me is that intimidated, didn't want to do it. I'm like, that's going to destroy my back. That's what I kept thinking. I got onto it and I was like, these are awesome. These are way better than sit-ups for me. These are better than V-ups. I'm like, I'm going to do these as opposed to some of the other stuff.
And some people, weirdly enough, are more comfortable with their back on a GHD just because it's not pressing into the ground. I've had a couple clients that are like, I have no pain on the GHD, but a simple sit-up or V-up, they have pain in their back. So sometimes the opposite ends up happening,
What was the way that you tested to see if they were good to get on a GHD? Was it like no arms sit up, or was it having the PC in the back? Or
yeah, I used to always do like a strict ab mat sit up where they held. and I would have them do reps. I think I like more the stick sit up because like you really like those are fucking hard. So if
Yeah.
you can put a PVC behind your back, you can give me 15 stick sit ups, and you're not like flailing your feet high in the air and failing reps. Then I'm like, I know you have the strength. And basically the way I coach that is I don't tell them what I'm doing. I'm like, hey guys, we're gonna do 15 stick sit ups. I show them what it looks like, and then I'm like, hey, if you got to drop the stick and throw your arms, go ahead. Don't worry about it. And you see some people get through like 3, and then they're like, what the fuck? They drop it and they start throwing. They don't know that I'm about to say, if you couldn't do all 15, you're not going to do the GHD today. So they accidentally test themselves correctly, because if they know, you can still tell that someone has no business on, but then you do have those people that are just trying to gut through 15, and it's going to take them 2 minutes to do. And obviously we don't want that either. So that's the stick sit-up's like my new tester for it. I also started teaching the leg fire on an ab mat sit-up before I go to the GHD, so people get it before they're actually on there. You guys, can you envision that? So it's
Yeah,
like on the ab
I
mat sit-up.
actually taught my some of the members last week how to do that.
It's also like substantially an easier sit-up. It makes
Yeah.
it, you can fly on ab mat sit-ups with this. You just, when you lay back, instead of butterflying your legs, you let them go straight with a slight knee bend, just like the GHD. You lay back and when you sit up, you just straighten your legs. And it kind of teaches the firing and the line of action for a GHD sit up on the floor. So even if someone has no business on the GHD, you can actually teach them the skill of the GHD. So eventually, when they do develop the strength that it's appropriate to be on, they know how to do it like bam, and they're a freaking gangster veteran on that thing. All right, cool. Yeah, just have people get spotted though to your thing. That brings a lot of comfort with that. And if you have someone that's really wary, as the coach, you be the spotter. They'll trust you even more than another member. Anything else on GHC?
I'm wondering if you can similar to what you're saying with like the legs being straight versus butterfly, and then maybe even have someone hold the ankles that act as like the resting post on the GHD machine. And
The
then they
only
will
hard
really
thing, it could be very good or it could go very wrong. I'm not sure because you do kind of move a little bit. So I don't know with holding the ankles. I don't know if it would allow the person to like have that
No,
little movement. Does
I
that
don't
make
think
sense?
I don't think so, because what
Because you
moves
kind of
is your
slide
legs
forward.
and not, yeah. Yeah. Like you
It,
wouldn't be able to kick like you're
it's
supposed
hard.
to if you're holding the feet.
Like you'd be able to drive into their hands. I think that's what Justin's thinking. But like
Yeah, that
you
makes
wouldn't have
sense.
that natural move. Like you kind of slide forward. You would lose that a little bit. I'll take keep
Yeah.
you guys gotta remind me. I keep forgetting to do videos. Text me. I'll get a video of those so you guys can see them. On the hollow rock, something that I really like doing. One, I actually run a progression for it, which I think has helped a lot of people in my gym actually get it right. And obviously that turns into gymnastics. But for the hollow rock, do partner hollow rocks. I think it's a lot more fun, right? And you kind of are able to give people rest periods on and off as well, which, holding a hollow position, doing a hollow rock is very hard. So the way you would do that is the person builds their hollow, they get into position, right? And they're in that banana shape, and then partner that you're working with will just take the feet, and they are the ones that are actually rocking. If the athlete's doing a really good job with the hollow position, their whole body will rock. If the athlete isn't doing a good job and they have flexion in a joint or some relaxation around a joint, then you'll see like their hip starts moving and they're not moving. So it teaches the person how to actually be one unit versus like a poor hollow where the joints just flex around. Because then if that happens, that's going to happen on the pull-up bar as well. And it's kind of fun. You get, some people that are pretty strong cores, you can go up and down, you can lift them all the way up, you can go sideways, like you can literally do anything. Just make sure no one drops somebody. Sounds dumb, but I've seen it happen. And you can do the same thing, obviously, with an arch hold too. And then the last one, we got L sit, everyone's favorite. I actually think that L sit is the most effective one. It's by far the worst. No one enjoys it. It's hard the first 2 seconds you start. But again, going back to the hip flexors and those lower abdominals, we know those are active. I like the L sit the most because all of your core has to do its job, right? Versus a GHD sit up, my lats don't really have to do much. On an L sit, my lats have to do their job. And we've got that shoulder down, building shoulder stability. Lats obviously have to engage under the scaps to help stabilize as well. So it becomes more of like a total unit than like the GHD or the hollow, where it's not everything working to its maximum capacity. Does that make sense? And I think that's why L sits are so hard, because when we talk about the core, if you've got a couple really strong points of the core and then you've got a weak point of the core, you feel it really fast. It's like going to a concert and then there's a bunch of musicians playing. It's an orchestra, and then you've got one dude in the middle of it that doesn't know how to play his instrument. Who are you gonna hear? You're gonna hear that bad one, right? It's the same way our core works. If we've got a weak point, that weak point gets exploited and it becomes an issue. And I think that's why LSITs partly are as hard as they are. Varying degrees on that obviously is going to help. So not being totally straight leg, bending the knees a little bit, or staggering legs, or doing like a tuck. All of those ways are really good ways to build it. If you read the article, Glassman has like a point system that you can accumulate to, and every 15 seconds is 1 point, and his goal is to get 12 points. Which, if you do some fast math, that's a 3-minute L-sit hold. That's like you won. You won the core battle at that point in time if you're doing that all out.
You sort of answered my question I had, Nate, but I want to see if maybe Glassman had a little bit more on it. I was going to say, what's a good programming for L holds or L sits? I've been including them a lot, and I've only been doing like 4 rounds of like 15-second holds.
I would go high. I would go more rounds. And I'm gonna. Glassman had the 15-second thing to shoot and build there. He did not talk about what I'm about to talk about in this, but I'm going to talk about it from a personal experience point. When I had a January, long time ago, that I did an L-sit every day. My goal was a 2-minute L-sit hold. And then COVID happened. The goal fell apart. Which 2 minutes would be ridiculous, right? Like, and my plan was to try to do it over a year.
I die at 15 seconds.
I started at 8 seconds. 8 seconds on parallettes with my feet out was horrible, but I would do 10 rounds. And at first it was like 10 rounds, 8 seconds, but like a 20-second rest. And basically all I did was added a second or two here and deducted a second or two here. And just slowly started merging those two. By the time like I was towards the end of the month, I was up to doing like 25, 30 seconds in a pop with like a 20, 30-second rest. I would alter it too. Days that I didn't want to do it, I would give myself more rest to like help get me to do it. Days that I was feeling it, I would get a little more aggressive on, but I would do like 8 to 10 sets always. I think that helped me versus like 4 sets. I think not that it's not effective. I just think it would be more effective if you took more of like more frequency on it. And I kind of stole it from a Tabata. I just basically made a modified Tabata for myself.
Well, I could also think of a time accumulation of trying to get 2 minutes total and do the same way you were breaking it down essentially. Or 3 minutes.
Some days I would do that too. Some days I would say like, I'm going to do 2 minutes and I can do those 2 minutes however I want to do them. So like there was times I would say it was a few weeks into doing it every day at this point, but I would just like go for broke and try to just hold one as long as I could. And I would get to a point, and then of course, like all the other sets that came after that were not so pretty and they got really nasty, but it like kind of gave variance into what I was doing as well. And then there was other days that I'm like, I'm going to accumulate 2 minutes, but I was like very regimented in it. I was 10 on, 10 off type stuff. But I think the most important thing is make sure you have a linear progression going to where it's like, it's not just every day is 15 seconds. It's like you did 15 today, tomorrow it could just be 16. And then like you just are making sure you're going, or it was 4 sets of 15 today, tomorrow is 5 sets of 15. So you just have steps in the right direction. It would also vary how I was sat too. So sometimes it'd be legs all the way out. Other times it would be, I'm gonna go longer, but I'm gonna bend my knees a little bit. I pretty much always did them on parallettes because part of my goal was to strengthen like my shoulder stability. It also will strengthen your triceps. If you're in a good position, your triceps fucking work. And that translated for me into a very strong front rack. That was the best I had ever felt in my life on front rack holds. Yeah, thrusters became a non-issue. And then I stopped doing them and they became an issue again. Classic. Just like we all. So that 3-minute L-sit hold is like very daunting, right? I don't expect any of us to go knock out a 3-minute L-sit after training, but I think if you really grind and strive for that, and you never get to a 3-minute, but you get to like a solid minute, your core is probably substantially stronger than everybody else in the gym. So it's just one of those things like, why do we chase virtuosity and why do we chase the more advanced movements? Because those things are going to put us in a position that's really, really good, even if we miss. You know, what is it? If you shoot for the moon, if you miss, you land among the stars, like same shit. The other last little thing I want to end this call on, we talked about points of performance of a squat. We talked about, you know, doing GHD sit-ups properly, doing hollow holds properly. Something that is one of my biggest pet peeves as a coach is I will program some very intentful stimuluses, right? And if the athlete executes incorrectly, they actually end up missing the point of why I program something. So I'm going to give you an example today. Our high rocks class, we're really trying to work like glute and hamstring stamina. So we had heavy Russian kettlebell swings into rowing, right? If done correctly, they're both a hinge pattern, right? Athlete A can hinge all the kettlebell swings, get on the rower. It's a hinge, the seat's not all the way by the butt, and they hit the stimulus I want. Athlete B does it feels easier kettlebell swing where they kind of just do a mini squat and they never hinge. And then they row and they slide the seat all the way down and they're actually more quad dominant and they're more squatty on the rower and they get no posterior chain, right? Even worse, athlete C does one well and one incorrect. So they didn't get either one of the stimuluses. So sometimes when we look at movements, I think a lot of times athletes don't recognize, and you know, we get our programming from Mayhem and someone may not recognize it, but movement mechanics matter and they get thought of even in when somebody's creating a workout sometimes, right? So have that in mind. Sometimes you will miss intents that are not even talked about by doing things mechanically poor. Same thing goes on a squat, right? If I squat down and I go butt first and then I straighten, maybe I'm doing things that are going to try to blow up those quads on purpose. Maybe it's you know, squats and GHD sit-ups, and the whole point is I want to hammer the quads and hammer the hip flexors. But if you're squatting 4 and you're kind of doing one of these, you know, good morning stand squats, and then we're on the GHD and we're not firing our legs, you totally missed what I was trying to do today.
Mayhem likes to program to crush our quads and then make us do box jumps right after. They love to do that.
That's straight conditioning.
I'm like,
they
come
do
on, enough.
They
It's gonna
do.
break my shins again.
I know for a fact, Darren, that does a lot of the programming, one of his favorite things to programming, everyone that does Mayhem will be like, yeah, it is. It's bike and burpees too. There's always a bike and burpee every week. Always. But
I'm cool with that. I just don't like doing bike and then
sketchy.
maybe go do a box jump. Like my legs aren't working.
It's sketchy.
We did it last week.
When I coach it, I usually give the option to, if you want to get off the bike and just no box, jump as high as you can, or sit on the box and just come on. Don't jump on a box, but like a seated box jump, and just stand up and jump to do that, because yeah, it's real sketchy. And if you don't have a lot of experience, you fuck up. I had a guy fuck up last week and like bad fuck up, couldn't do his workout fuck up, like full
Well,
first aid kit out type stuff.
Nate programmed today. It was 15-second sprint on the bike and then just a minute of easy squats, and I was dying. I thought that
Your
was
quads are
horrible.
gone.
I
Yeah.
thought that was horrible.
What kind of workout is that, guys? Can you recognize that? It's a lactate clearance workout. As hard as you can on the bike. A lot of lactate builds up. Get off the bike, really easy air squats. Just got to keep moving. Heart rate's through the roof. It's teaching the body how to clear lactate. When you start those squats, though, horrible. The last 15 seconds of squats, kind of feel you're okay. And then you just immediately do it again. It hurts again. That's another thing. If you guys have space in your gym and you have a mayhem workout like last week where you just hammer this bike, box jump over burpee, try to get people to get back on the bike and go really slow. They will become a fitter athlete. They'll teach their body how to clear and things like that. It is like pulling teeth to get people to do it. It's like nearly impossible, but if one person listens, they'll be even better, you know?
Nate, did Elise send you? There was this video on Instagram of this guy teaching you how to kind of read part of the map of the rower as to if you're doing it correctly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that's a cool little thing. I'll see if I can forward that in the group if I can find it. So it's just your row stroke efficiency. You guys have probably seen it on the rower. It gives you a little graph. It's like a nice little like bump. That means your stroke is very smooth through. But like depending on what that graph does will tell you where you may have a hitch in your row and where you're maybe have like an energy leak. It's a cool little thing to play with. It's really frustrating though if you have a bad row stroke because it's like you learn real fast that it's kind of hard. Oh, I don't think I have anything else. I'll make sure to get the article in, the app article in the right one on today in the app. 3-minute L sit, 2-minute straight hollow rocks. Both are terrible. That's the goal. All right, guys. You guys have anything else? All right, we will call today a day, and I will see you guys on Thursday.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.